to go to Dan Geltrude right now because all of this comes at a time when states, localities are just trying to get some business back right now. But that might prove easier said than done. The problem is that they lose a lot of revenue when that happens, and they need that revenue back. And already, near Governor Cuomo has hinted the possibility of tax hikes, spending cuts, you name it, just to put things in balance. States like New York have to balance their budget at the end of the fiscal year. Some can push it out, as they have in New Jersey, but they have to make sure it's in balance. Easier said than done, I guess, Dan, right?
Yes, it is, Neil. Look, I wouldn't say that New York is a well-run state to start with, and then you drop a pandemic, which creates, quite frankly, economic ruin, and we're really going to have a tough situation with it. So the economic impact is about $30 billion on New York. That's what the estimate is. But just in this fiscal year, New York is looking at an $8 billion shortfall. But what's interesting here is at the beginning of the fiscal year, for April 1st, New York did not institute any deep cuts. So what's going on? It's kind of business as usual. And I believe they were relying upon some federal assistance coming from Washington. Well, that's not coming, Neil, at least for the foreseeable future. So New York is really up against it. And I think Governor Cuomo is probably being honest in saying tax increases are certainly going to be a possibility.
You know, I want to bring Kennedy in the mix here. Kenny, if you think about it, if you need another reason to go slow heading back to the Big Apple, even with some of these financial firms saying we want you to get back on the 21st, I think Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs have been advocating that. A couple of other companies as well. I'm sure more down the road. But to hear news like this, taxes going up and all of this, and to say nothing of the crime and other issues that have run rampant in New York, who's going to get them to go back, you know?
Yeah, the quality of life issues in New York spread beyond New York City, but we are facing a pension crisis here in New York State, and that's because of, you know, this unfunded pension liability, which has obviously been a huge problem in places like Illinois and Michigan and California, and there's really no plan to tackle that. The governor talks about raising taxes, but all you're doing there, when you've got a majority of workers still working from home, they look at they've still got high rents or mortgage obligation, they've got high property taxes, and now the governor's talking about raising taxes further. That's an invitation for people to leave and go to places like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and Nevada, which are much more amenable and have, frankly, a rosier economic future to offer future citizens.
You know, Dan, I hear out of these local and state leaders, though, people talk about leaving New York, but, you know, it's a great place. The city's a wonderful place and the arts and everything else. But that was the kind of arrogance I was hearing coming out of California officials say, look at our beaches, look at our, you know, environment, look at everything we have going for us. And people were leaving in droves for the safe confines of a Texas or a Florida, or South Carolina, some of these others. So I wonder if they're just whistling past the graveyard here.
They probably are. Look, New York is a great place. New York City is a great place, but people are going to look at the cost benefit. So when you weigh these things out, they say, well, maybe Florida or Texas isn't quite as exciting as New York. But when we look at what price we're paying for this excitement, plus the issues of public safety and other things that are going on right now, people are saying, you know what, it's time to move. And quite frankly, New York is looking at a really difficult situation, Neil, because if they don't open up the economy, if they don't get people coming back into New York, it's a circuitous problem in that they will have to raise taxes. They raise taxes, more people leave, and it ends up becoming a bigger and bigger mess. And as I said before, I don't think that they can look to Washington, D.C. to bail them out of this.
Well, someone needs to bail out Washington, D.C. because of the debt that they've racked up here. I'm just wondering, you know, when you look at this, Kennedy, is anyone looking at how much money is being spent and how the federal government doesn't have it to spend? Now, we can create and print money, and it's gotten us out of a lot of problems before, but this idea that there's going to be some Washington manna from heaven to save the day, that might be unrealistic.
Yeah, how much of the general budget is going to go to paying down the debt when the bill comes? And Nancy Pelosi is talking, her first proposal was over $3 trillion for big bailouts for states like California and New York. The governors there have been horrible stewards of public money, and they dig themselves into these holes. And Dan's absolutely right. There is so much arrogance that goes into this. And I don't understand why they don't look at other states that have lower or no income taxes and ask them, how are you doing it? What are you doing differently? What should we be doing? Because cutting costs, cutting spending, that should be at the top of the list. Taxing people out of existence is so wildly incompetent.
There is that. Kennedy, I want to thank you. Dan Geltrude, thank you as well. All right, this, of course, is the 19th anniversary, of course.